The great hall of the Galactic Science Academy fell silent as the High Scholar raised three of his four arms. Around him, beings from 1,000 worlds waited. Some floated in tanks of liquid methane. Others stood on legs, tentacles, or energy fields. They had gathered at the edge of the galaxy, in a station built long before humans learned to make fire. "Another cycle ends," the High Scholar said, his translator making his words understood by all. "We celebrate our discoveries. They have mapped 17 new star clusters using their dream sight. The collective has created engines that bend space itself. The law have composed mathematical songs that predict planetary movements." Applause filled the hall, though it took many forms. Some clapped, others buzzed. A few released clouds of pleasant scent. "But we must discuss a problem," the High Scholar continued. "The void between and still pulses with unknown energy. For 300 cycles we have studied it. For 300 cycles we have failed to understand it." A diplomat stood, her silver skin shimmering. "Our seers have dreamed of the void. They say it speaks to the Ancient Ones, warning us away." "Nonsense," growled an engineer, his mechanical body whirring. "Our sacred calculations prove it is a tear in reality, left by the gods during creation." "Both of you are wrong," sang a la philosopher, colors dancing across her crystalline form. "I have observed it for decades. Its pattern is too ugly to be natural. It must be artificial, created by some crude species." Arguments erupted. The dream seers insisted their visions were truth. The pulled-out religious texts filled with numbers. The law dismissed anything that did not match their sense of beauty. Species shouted over each other in a dozen languages. No one listened. No one could agree. Dr. Sarah sat in the back watching. She was young for a human, only 32 cycles around her sun. This was her first time at the academy, her first time seeing how the galaxy really worked. She had come expecting wonder and wisdom. Instead, she found chaos. The arguing went on for hours. Sarah noticed something strange. These beings had technology beyond human dreams. They traveled between stars. They lived for thousands of years. But when they tried to explain the universe, they sounded like children arguing on a playground. No one tested their ideas. No one asked for proof. They just believed what they wanted to believe. Finally, Sarah stood. "Excuse me." The hall barely noticed her. She was small, from a species most had never heard of. Her people had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago. "Excuse me," she said louder. The High Scholar's many eyes turned to her. "Yes, human. You wish to add your cultural beliefs to our discussion." "No," Sarah said. "I want to solve the problem." Laughter rippled through the hall. A researcher, his skin covered in luminescent spots, grinned at her. "Young one, we have tried for 3 centuries. What makes you think you can succeed?" "Because you have not really tried," Sarah said. "You have argued, you have believed, you have guessed, but you have not used the method." "What method?" the High Scholar asked. Sarah took a breath. "On Earth, we call it the scientific method. It is how we turn questions into answers. I can teach you, but better yet, I can show you. Give me 6 months. Let me study the void using human techniques. If I fail, you lose nothing. If I succeed, you gain everything." The hall erupted again. Some called her arrogant, others called her foolish. But the High Scholar raised his arms once more. 300 cycles of failure," he said slowly. "What harm can 6 months do? Very well, human, show us your method. But know this, if you fail, you will prove that your way is just another cultural story, no better than dream visions or sacred math." Sarah nodded. "And if I succeed, you must listen, really listen, to what I have found and to how I found it." "Agreed," said the High Scholar. Sarah spent the first week building her team. Most species refused to join her. They saw no point in learning from such a young race. But a few were curious. Anna, who had always questioned his people's teachings, volunteered first. Then came Thessaly, Allah, who had been shamed for asking too many questions. A young named Baron joined because he wanted to prove his father's generation wrong. Lastly, a who could no longer dream the visions of her ancestors, signed on out of desperation. They gathered in a small research station orbiting the void. Through the windows, they could see it, a region of space where energy pulsed in patterns that made no sense. It had been there as long as anyone could remember, defying explanation. First, Sarah said, standing before a whiteboard, we must understand what we do not know. We have an observation, unexplained energy pulses. We do not know what causes them. But my people's dreams say, began. No, Sarah said gently. That is a belief. We need a hypothesis. That means a guess we can test, a guess that could be wrong. And spots flickered confusion. Why would we make a guess we think is wrong? Because, Sarah explained, we are not trying to prove we are right, we are trying to find the truth. Those are different things. This concept seemed alien to all of them. In their cultures, changing your mind meant weakness. Admitting error meant shame. The idea of purposely looking for ways you might be wrong felt unnatural, even painful. Sarah continued, we will make a list of possible causes. Then we will test each one. Not by arguing or dreaming or calculating from old books. We will run experiments. We will gather data. We will measure and observe, and we will let reality tell us the answer. But what if reality's answer is ugly? Thessaly asked, her colors dimming with worry. Then reality is ugly, Sarah said, but at least we will know the truth. They started slowly. Sarah taught them to form hypotheses. Maybe the pulses came from a hidden star. Maybe they were echoes from another dimension. Maybe they were signals from an ancient machine. Each guess had to be something they could test. And struggled at first. He kept wanting to adjust the data to match what he already believed. When Sarah caught him, he hung his head in shame. It is not shameful to be wrong, Sarah told him. It is only shameful to lie about it. The data shows your hypothesis is false. That is good. Now we know one more thing that is not true and we can move on. This idea amazed him. On his world, being wrong meant losing status, losing respect. Here, Sarah celebrated their failures because each failure brought them closer to truth. Weeks passed. They eliminated hypotheses one by one. The hidden star theory failed when their instruments detected no stellar matter. The dimensional echo theory collapsed when they found no quantum signatures. The ancient machine theory died when they discovered the pulses had existed for millions of years, far longer than any known civilization. Thessaly grew frustrated. My people would have given up by now. They would say the void is too ugly to understand and they would study something else. That is why they never understood it, Sarah said. Baron made a breakthrough in the third month. While running routine scans, he noticed something strange. The energy pulses matched the pattern of dark matter movements in the region. Not perfectly, but close enough to investigate. This could be coincidence, he said carefully, using the new word Sarah had taught them. Then we test it, Sarah replied. They designed an experiment. If the pulses were related to dark matter, then they should change when dark matter concentrations changed. They set up sensors throughout the region, creating a three-dimensional map of both the pulses and the invisible dark matter that filled the space. The correlation was undeniable. The pulses followed dark matter movements almost exactly, but with a slight delay and amplification. We need a mechanism, Sarah said. Why would dark matter create these energy pulses? Who had been quiet for days, suddenly spoke up. In my dreams, no, wait. I have an idea to test. What if dark matter is interacting with quantum fields in a way we have never seen before? The math suggests it should be possible, but we always dismissed it because no one had observed it. Why did you dismiss it? Sarah asked. Because it seemed too simple, admitted. My people value complexity in our dream visions. Simple answers feel wrong to us. Reality does not care what feels right, Sarah said. It only cares what is true. Let us test your idea. They spent 2 months building instruments sensitive enough to detect quantum field fluctuations near dark matter. The work was tedious, filled with failures and setbacks. Equipment broke. Calculations proved wrong. They had to start over again and again. But slowly, the truth emerged. Dark matter in high concentrations could indeed interact with quantum fields in a previously unknown way. The interaction created a cascade effect, amplifying tiny quantum fluctuations into the large energy pulses they observed. It was a new kind of physics, hiding in plain sight for eons. When Sarah compiled their findings, the team stared at the data in wonder. They had done it. They had solved a mystery that had baffled the galaxy for 3 centuries. More importantly, they had done it using a method that anyone could follow, anyone could verify, anyone could trust. "We should return to the academy," and said, his spots glowing with pride. But Sarah shook her head. "First, we must try to prove ourselves wrong. We must check our work, run the experiments again, look for any error or bias. Only when we are certain should we present our findings." "But we are certain," Baron protested. "Are we?" Sarah asked. "Or do we just want to be right?" They spent another month checking everything. They found 3 small errors, corrected them, and confirmed their results. Only then did Sarah send a message to the Galactic Science Academy. The High Scholar himself came to their station, bringing with him dozens of researchers from across the galaxy. They crowded into the small observation room as Sarah presented their findings. She started not with the answer but with the process. She explained hypothesis formation, controlled experiments, data collection without bias, peer review, and statistical analysis. She showed them every step they had taken, every failure they had encountered, every correction they had made. "The beauty of this method," she said, "is that you do not have to trust me. You can follow our steps exactly. You can gather your own data. You can prove us right or prove us wrong. The method works the same for anyone who uses it." The delegation looked uncomfortable. "But our dream visions are sacred. Would you have us abandon them?" "No," Sarah said. "Dream visions might give you ideas, inspire hypotheses. But then you test those hypotheses against reality. You do not assume your visions are true simply because they feel true." An elder spoke up, his voice filled with anger. "Our mathematical proofs come from texts written by the founders of our civilization. You ask us to doubt them." "I ask you to verify them," Sarah replied. "If your ancient math is correct, testing will confirm it. If it is wrong, testing will show you where the errors are. Either way you learn. Either way you grow." A la philosopher older than most worlds sang a question. "But what of beauty? What of elegance? Are we to accept ugly truths?" Sarah smiled. "In my experience, the deepest truths are often beautiful, but we must let reality show us its beauty, not force our ideas of beauty onto reality." The High Scholar was silent for a long time. Around him, the researchers examined Sarah's data, following her methods, running their own calculations. One by one, they confirmed her findings. The mystery of the void had been solved, not through dreams or sacred texts or aesthetic judgment, but through systematic observation and testing. Finally, the High Scholar spoke. "I am old. I have studied the cosmos for 8,000 of your human years. I have accumulated knowledge from 100 worlds and 1,000 teachers. But today, I must admit something painful. I have never truly understood how to learn." He turned to face the assembled beings. "This human has shown us something remarkable, not a cultural story or a philosophical system, but a tool that any mind can use, a tool that leads to truth regardless of who wields it. The Galactic Science Academy has existed for 50,000 cycles," he continued. "In that time, we have made great discoveries, but I now see that most of those discoveries were accidents. We stumbled upon truth by luck, not by method. We argued endlessly because we had no way to settle our arguments except through force of personality or political power. The high scholar's eyes moved from face to face, species to species. This ends now. I propose that the Galactic Science Academy adopt the human scientific method as our universal standard for investigating the natural world, not as a replacement for our cultures, but as a common language for truth, a way to test our ideas, whatever their source, against the reality we all share. The debate that followed lasted 3 days. Traditionalists argued that adopting an alien method would destroy cultural identity. How could they remain if they abandoned their dream visions? How could they honor their ancestors if they questioned sacred texts? But others saw clearly. A young pointed out that her people's greatest discoveries had happened when they accidentally followed these principles. Allah showed how the scientific method had helped her find beauty in unexpected places. A demonstrated that testing his ancestors' math had revealed errors, but also hidden wisdom that no one had noticed before. Sarah spoke last. She stood before thousands of beings, some of whom had lived before her species had even invented writing. I understand your fear, she said. You think the scientific method will erase who you are, but it will not. They will still dream. They will still calculate. The law will still seek beauty. The difference is this: you will know which dreams are true, which calculations are correct, which patterns are really beautiful. She paused, looking around the hall. On Earth, we have thousands of cultures. Each has its own stories, its own wisdom, its own way of seeing the world. The scientific method did not destroy those cultures. It gave them a way to test their wisdom and share it with others. A Zen master and a Christian priest and an atheist scientist can all use the same method to study the same question. They might start with different ideas, but the method leads them to the same truth. Truth is not human, Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger. Truth is not or law. Truth belongs to reality itself. The scientific method is simply how we listen to what reality is telling us. It is how we stop fooling ourselves. The vote was close, but it passed. The Galactic Science Academy would adopt the scientific method as the universal standard for empirical investigation. Universities across 1,000 worlds would restructure their teaching. Researchers would learn to form hypotheses, design experiments, collect data, and accept when they were wrong. The change did not happen overnight. Many older researchers refused to adapt. They clung to their old ways, their sacred beliefs, their comfortable assumptions. But the young embraced the new method eagerly. For the first time, they could challenge their elders not with disrespect, but with evidence. They could prove that new ideas worked without waiting centuries for political consensus. Within 10 years, the pace of discovery across the galaxy had doubled. Within 20, it had increased tenfold. Problems that had existed fell to systematic investigation. New technologies emerged from tested theories instead of lucky accidents. Species that had been rivals found they could collaborate when they shared a common method for seeking truth. 5 years after the Academy's vote, Sarah returned for another symposium. The hall had changed. Now, when researchers presented their findings, they included their methods, their raw data, their attempts to prove themselves wrong. When disagreements arose, beings did not argue endlessly. They designed experiments. They gathered evidence. They let reality decide. Sarah watched as he presented a paper on consciousness emergence in artificial minds. His methodology was flawless. His data was thorough. His conclusions challenged some of humanity's own theories about how minds worked. When he finished, Sarah stood and asked a pointed question about his control group selection, and answered confidently, then thanked her for catching a potential bias he had not considered. He would revise his paper, he said, and strengthen it. Sarah felt a swell of emotion. This, who 5 years ago had been afraid to admit error, now welcomed criticism as a gift. He had learned what it took humans thousands of years to understand, that being wrong is not failure, it is the first step toward being right. After the session, Young researchers from a dozen species crowded around Sarah. Allah asked about experimental design. A wanted advice on separating intuition from evidence. A sought help teaching the method to his home world's stubborn elders. Sarah answered their questions, but her mind was elsewhere. She thought about Earth, about the countless humans who had developed the scientific method over centuries. Aristotle and Al, Galileo and Newton and Curie. And they had built the method piece by piece, mistake by mistake, discovery by discovery. Those humans had never known that their method would one day unite a galaxy. They had simply wanted to understand their world. They had asked questions and refused to be satisfied with easy answers. They had tested their ideas against reality and accepted what they found, even when it contradicted everything they had been taught. Now their legacy stretched across the stars, not weapons or conquest or domination, though humanity had those things too. No, humanity's true gift to the galaxy was simpler and more profound. It was the idea that you could ask a question and actually find the answer, that you could admit ignorance without shame and pursue knowledge without bias, that reality was not whatever you wanted it to be, but something you could discover through patience, honesty, and work. The high scholar found Sarah as she stood by a window, looking out at the stars. "You are troubled," he observed. "Not troubled," Sarah said. "Just thinking. 5 years ago I was terrified. I was one human trying to change the mind of an entire galaxy. Now I see researchers using the method naturally as if they had always known it. It happened so fast." "Fast for you, perhaps," the high scholar said. "For me, it feels impossibly slow. I have spent 5 years unlearning 8,000 years of habits. Every day, I must fight the urge to rely on authority or tradition instead of evidence. Every day, I must remind myself that being wrong is acceptable." He was quiet for a moment. "You gave us a gift, Sarah, but it is a difficult gift. The scientific method is not comfortable. It does not let us hide behind our certainties. It demands honesty, first with ourselves and then with others. Many find it too hard. They return to the old ways because the old ways let them believe what they wish to believe." "I know," Sarah said. "We have the same problem on Earth. The method exists, but not everyone uses it. It is easier to trust your feelings, to believe what your group believes, to reject evidence that makes you uncomfortable." "Then why do you do it?" the high scholar asked. "Why follow a method that is so hard, that tells you so often that you are wrong?" Sarah smiled. "Because reality does not care what I believe. The universe will be what it is whether I understand it or not. But if I use the method, if I am honest and careful and willing to be wrong, then slowly, piece by piece, I can understand truly. Not just believe, but know. And once I know something true, I can build on it. I can use it. I can share it with others who can verify it for themselves." She turned to face him. "That is why humanity feared by some, respected by others. Not because we are the strongest or the oldest but because we ask questions and we do not stop asking until we find real answers. We are not content with stories. We demand truth." The high scholar made a gesture that Sarah had learned meant deep agreement. "Yes, that is what frightens the old powers. They built their authority on controlling knowledge, on being the only ones who knew the sacred secrets. But the scientific method destroys that control. It says that anyone can discover truth if they use the right method. A child can prove an elder wrong if the child has better evidence." "It is not just frightening," Sarah said. "It is dangerous. When everyone can seek truth, when authority cannot hide behind tradition, then power must justify itself with reality. Bad ideas cannot survive simply because they are old ideas. Leaders cannot rule simply because they claim special knowledge." "You have started a revolution," the high scholar said softly. "Not a revolution of violence, but something more fundamental, a revolution of thought. The galaxy will never be the same." Sarah looked out at the stars again, at the thousands of worlds now teaching their children to question, to test, to verify. She thought of all the truths yet to be discovered, all the problems yet to be solved, all the mistakes that would be made and corrected and learned from. Good, she said. On Earth, people would later argue about what Sarah's true achievement had been. Some said she had made humanity famous across the galaxy. Others said she had advanced science by centuries. Still others claimed she had created a new era of galactic cooperation. But Sarah knew the truth was simpler. She had not invented the scientific method. She had not been the first to use it, or the best at using it. She had simply shown it to beings who had never seen it before. She had taught them that there was a better way to seek knowledge than arguing or dreaming or calculating from old texts. The method itself was the achievement. Everything else was just a consequence of teaching the galaxy how to think clearly, how to test honestly, how to learn truly. And in the end, that was the most human thing of all. Not strength or speed or size, but the stubborn refusal to accept comfortable lies when difficult truths were available. The willingness to be wrong in pursuit of eventually being right. The understanding that reality was not an enemy to be conquered or a mystery to be feared, but a puzzle to be solved through patience, honesty, and work. The galaxy had learned that lesson now, and it would never forget who had taught it.